Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down my tiered rookie wide receiver rankings, including some all 22 cut-ups I made of each and every player. I'm going to tier them out for you, detail out why I think that some players are better than others, and why I would cluster some in certain groups as opposed to other groups. And yeah, watch to the end of this video, and you should have a pretty good idea where you should probably be ranking your rookies this season. And so in tier 1, I have Travis Hunter of the Jacksonville Jaguars and Ted McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. When it comes to Travis Hunter, he is only the second wide receiver in the past 2 seasons that I would grade as an elite wide receiver prospect. Now, my grading system is more so geared towards athleticism, yak ability, and, obviously route running is considered there as well as release packages and the like. He graded out as the second highest wide receiver in the past 2 seasons, and once again, the only elite tier wide receiver in this class, just half a point under Malik Neighbors, who was a 91.5 this past season. I think Travis Hunter is absolutely fantastic. You want to talk about ball skills? His ball skills are absolutely ridiculous, and they show up both on offense and defense. Now, here's the only predicament, right? He is a generational player. He plays both cornerback and wide receiver. Now, a couple things I like about the situation, right? First of all, Jacksonville traded multiple picks to be able to acquire him, moving up from 5th overall to 2nd overall with the Cleveland Browns. And so I like the trade up. That means they're definitely going to look to get the best bang for their buck considering the draft capital they spent to get him, right? But then also Liam Cohen, the new head coach, has mentioned that he is going to start out primarily at least as a wide receiver. That is exactly what we wanted to hear in fantasy football, right? I think that, he's obviously going to be slotted opposite of Brian Thomas Jr., but while I don't necessarily think he's just going to dominate the target share over Brian Thomas, I think both wide receivers can eat in this offense. We saw both Godwin and Evans this past season under Cohen both dominate. So I definitely don't think that target share is going to be an issue because, Bretton Strange, in my opinion, is probably their third best asset in the passing game. That really does not scare me in any way, shape, or form. Now, as far as the quarterback play, Trevor Lawrence, is he, the generational quarterback that we wanted him to be? I don't think so, but I also think he's had pretty mediocre to terrible coaching, poor people to throw to in the sense of the weapons in the passing game for the most part until this past season. Christian Kirk, a wide receiver 2, in my opinion, was his wide receiver 1. Evan Ingram's fine, but, more just like, a short area yak guy, in my opinion. And his offensive line has been one of the worst in football consistently. I really think that under Liam Cohen, he is going to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence. He got the most out of Baker Mayfield this past season. I mean, he was a legitimate MVP candidate under Liam Cohen. So I really think that Travis Hunter is going to be deployed all over the formation as both an X, Z, and a slot. I think that he is going to be on the field for quite a bit of the snaps. I think he's going to produce early and often. And I think he comps to Garrett Wilson, who is a little bit more of an athlete necessarily than just the most technically refined wide receiver. But I think the upside with Travis Hunter is just so incredible. Now, getting to Ted McMillan, he graded out as an 87. That is the same score in which I gave to Rome Odunze this past season, although I do give the edge to McMillan because he's a better yak threat. With the Panthers, he has Bryce Young as a quarterback. His first season, his rookie season, he really didn't have anybody to throw to, a poor system around him, and really just didn't look very good. Then this past season, he started out slow, got benched, but when he came back, he looked absolutely fantastic. Now, is this going to be a Jordan Love type of thing where he just doesn't really look good after that flash? Remains to be seen, but I was definitely encouraged by what I saw. And obviously having Canales as the head coach is fantastic. He always gets the most out of his quarterbacks. Now, when we think about the competition, you have an aging Adam Thielen. You have Xavier Legette, who showed some flashes, but dealt with a wrist injury and just really didn't show what we would like from a wide receiver selected in the first round, right? JT Sanders, I definitely thought showed some flashes, but he was injured. He had that neck injury, and he kind of just didn't look quite the same at the end of the season. And so, really Ted is going to step in and immediately be the unquestioned wide receiver 1. And I definitely understand why you might have him over Travis Hunter personally. I think Travis Hunter is just a better talent, and I prefer talent over situation. I think that generally that's just the correct move, in my opinion, at least, within reason for sure. But yeah, he's fantastic. He can be used all over the formation. I think he's going to see some slot work. He's going to see some X work. I think he could be deployed as a Z, but I definitely think that he is the best fit, probably as their X, but it remains to be seen what Canales is going to do, but I do trust him. Ted's fantastic after the catch, has vice grip hands. Pretty technically refined as a route runner. He's not really going to stack anybody vertically deep very often, especially at the NFL level, since he really didn't do it consistently at the collegiate level. But I think he's a fantastic wide receiver. He had over 700 yards as a true freshman and then 1,300 plus in each of the past 2 seasons. He's an early declared, just like Travis Hunter. And I really just think the upside with both of these guys and as well as the floor, is just so much higher than some of these guys I'm going to mention later, just because of the production profile, what I saw in film, and especially with the draft capital that was used to select them. Now, moving on to tier 2, we have Emeka Ibuka, who graded out as an 83.5, Luther Burden III, who graded out as an 85.5, and Matthew Golden, who graded out as a 78. When it comes to Emeka Ibuka, he is one of the best, if not potentially the best route runner in this class. I personally would lean towards him being the best. He lands with the Buccaneers, which is, it's kind of like Rome Odunze and JSN in past seasons where there's just a lot of mouths to feed, right? Well, I think he's for sure, first of all, going to start in 3 wide receiver sets. I don't think he immediately starts over Evans at all because Evans is more of an X, whereas Ibuka is more of a slot only, potentially a Z, but I think more of your slot. I think he's kind of going to try to mold his game, I think he's probably going to try to learn quite a bit from Chris Godwin and a great teacher to teach him the slot, right? I definitely think that Ibuka and Godwin are going to switch off being in the slot and the Z. And I think, for the short term, the Emeka Ibuka's upside is a little bit limited, but he's such a good route runner. He got the first round draft capital that we all wanted. And, even though he wasn't an early declare, it's not really his fault that he had to play with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith. And now with Jeremiah Smith here, he was a senior. He also dealt with some injuries, so not perfect, but I definitely like him long term. I think that he resembles Chris Olave in a good way, minus the concussions. And so I definitely think that long term with Baker Mayfield in this offense, there's a ton of upside. I think he's going to get good quarterback play. It's going to be a productive offensive environment that should be high scoring. And while I think his rookie scoring is going to be a little bit suppressed, I definitely think that he's going to break out like JS ended this past season, and like I think Rome Odunze is going to this season. Moving on to Luther Burden III, he was selected by Chicago in the early second round, 39th overall. He graded out as an 85.5, a little bit ahead of Emeka Ibuka. Now with Burden, he's a little bit raw of a route runner in my opinion. He can separate vertically. He's great, on those slants, on those dig routes, right? And kind of those bubble screens, plays like that. He's more of your elite yak guy, which I really do like for fantasy football because he's going to get the 5-yard pass and turn it into 25 as opposed to getting, the 10-yard pass and then turning it into 12, right? So I really like the fit long term. Now, just like with Emeka Ibuka, JSN, Rome Odunze, it's a crowded situation, right? So I really like that he has Caleb Williams as his quarterback connected to Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson's going to get the most out of Caleb Williams, but he kind of conflicts a little bit, and it's a little bit redundant because they do have DJ Moore. Now, I think that Rome is going to be their X. I think that Moore is going to be their Z, and I think that Luther Burden is going to be their slot. So I don't think that Burden, just like with Ibuka, I don't think he sees the field in 2 wide receiver sets immediately, but I definitely think they're going to try to run a good bit of 11 personnel there in Chicago. Now, they also selected Colston Loveland inside the top 10, so that is a little bit interesting. I think that they're going to also try to do a little bit of 12 personnel with him and Cole Kmet. But as far as the long-term outlook, I really do think they're going to look to trade DJ Moore, especially after this season, once it becomes a little bit more reasonable for them to do so. I really like that he's connected once again to Ben Johnson. I think he's going to get the most out of Luther Burden. And I think the upside with some of these yak guys is just so incredible because if you think about most of the elite wide receivers in the NFL, one thing they almost all have in common is that they are not only good, but they are great after the catch. Moving on to Matthew Golden of the Packers, he graded out as a 78. I really don't like the landing spot, to be honest with you. I do like that he's connected to Matt LaFleur, an offensive-minded head coach, a Shanahan disciple, so I like the scheming, right? But I kind of see him as a little bit more of a wide receiver too, if I'm going to be honest with you. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that because I think there's definitely things to like about him, right? He is a good separator. He doesn't play to his 4.29 speed on the field, but he definitely plays like probably a high 4.3s type of wide receiver, which is plenty fast. He has fantastic hands to catch contested balls, especially we saw that in the end zone. And so I really do like Matthew Golden. I just think that some people are overhyping him a little bit. But once again, he does get the first round draft capital, which is fantastic. Now, one thing I think that is going to hamper him is Jordan Love. I personally am not very high on Jordan Love. I don't think he's the best real-life quarterback. So while I definitely think that Matt LaFleur is going to try to get the most out of him, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to do so with Jordan Love throwing him passes. Now, he also has to contend with a decent bit of wide receiver competition. I do think that he's the best out of these guys, but you have Jayden Reed, who's their slot. Jayden Reed is, in my opinion, by far and away their second best wide receiver. Then he's also going to have Romeo Doubs, potentially, Dontavian Wicks as well. They even drafted Savion Williams, who's kind of a mixture of a running back and a wide receiver all in one. Then you have Kraft, and they also like to run the ball a good bit. So I think that the volume is going to be somewhat limited because there's a lot of competition, and they like to run the ball a lot with Josh Jacobs. And so I think he's going to disappoint relative to some people's expectations of him, but I do think that he's a good player, and I definitely hope that I'm wrong and that he is a true wide receiver one. I just would caution people that he really didn't do that much in terms of the production in each of his first 3 seasons, and then he really broke out at the very end in the final 4 games or so of his true junior season. So this isn't, the same level of prospect at all as, the Malik Neighbors, the Roma Dunzes, and the like. And so once again, I do like him. I just think we need to be a little bit careful before we just crown this guy a wide receiver one in Dynasty. Moving on to tier 3, we have Kyle Williams of the Patriots, Jack Besh of the Raiders, and Jaden Higgins of the Texans. With Kyle Williams, I graded him out as a 78.5. I really like this guy. He's a good wide receiver prospect according to the prospect model I use. Now, his landing spot with the Patriots, he was selected in the 3rd round, but he really doesn't have very much target competition at all. And I'm a big fan of Drake May. I think that he's going to take a step up. I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw from him, given the dire situation with the 34th best ranked offensive line per PFF. Kayshon Boutte, to throw to Hunter Henry, Demario Douglas. These guys just don't strike fear in defenses. And so while they did sign Stephon Diggs, that is something to note. I definitely think that Kyle Williams is going to immediately start. He was a huge riser up draft boards. I was a little bit higher on him prior than a lot of people once I saw who he was and watched some of the film on him. I think this guy is explosive. He reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson. He's more of your just dominant athlete. He's incredible after the catch, and that is something I really prioritize when drafting wide receivers for fantasy football. He is one of the most he actually had the most yards after catch per reception of anybody in collegiate football that was draft eligible that had at least 75 targets this past season. This guy's incredible. I think they're going to look to get him the ball in the screen game, deep down the field, over the middle of the field. He was extremely successful on slant routes especially, which I think Drake May is going to hit him early and often on. I think the upside is potentially a very solid wide receiver 2 to potentially wide receiver 1 if touchdowns work his way. But yeah, I really like him. Then we have Jack Besh of the Raiders. He was selected in the 2nd round. He graded out as an 83.5, a little bit above Kyle Williams. This guy is a very good route runner on all 3 levels of the field. I think he profiles to be a little bit more of a big slot or potentially an X, probably not a Z because he's not really that fast off the line, right? And by the way, with Kyle Williams, I think that he has true positional versatility. Moving back to Besh, though, his target competition is pretty stiff, if I'm going to be honest with you. He does have Brock Bowers. Jacoby Myers is fine as well. So I think he's probably more so the definitive second option in this offense in the passing game, which is fine. But they also have Geno Smith and Pete Carroll, and they drafted Ashton Genty. So I definitely think that the Raiders are probably going to want to run the ball as much as they can. Geno Smith is a competent quarterback for sure, but I don't think he just has the elite upside. Plus, he's aging a little bit, right? And so I think that Besh is a very solid play and that he has the draft capital, and I think he's talented. I just think the upside is limited to probably somewhere in the wide receiver 2 range if everything works his way because of him not being the first option in the offense and the passing volume probably not being the best. But as far as the floor, I think that he's probably the second option once again. And I definitely think that he can be used basically in 2 of the 3 wide receiver spots effectively. And I think that's going to serve him well. And I think that he has a very good floor because I don't think the Raiders are going to be winning a ton of the games they're in given their division. Then we have Jaden Higgins of the Texans, who graded out as a 72.5. I'm a little bit lower on Jaden Higgins than some people. Some people took a look at the combine and said 4.47 speed. Wow. That, to be honest with you, just does not show up on the field, which is what matters the most, in my opinion. He struggles to consistently stack vertically down the field, so I don't think that he's going to be a very good X at the NFL level. He's also very poor against press coverage. Now, where do I think he does fit? I think that he would be a very good big slot. He has vice grip hands. He has little bursts of short area quickness, but just not good long speed, and overall not the best acceleration. But to be fair, for his size, his acceleration is plenty fine, right? Now, thinking about his fit in the offense, I think that in a best case scenario, just like with Jack Besh, that he is the second option because Nico Collins is just an elite wide receiver one, right? Now, the good news is Nico Collins can be the X, which will allow Jaden Higgins to, in my opinion, be the big slot in this offense. I think they could try putting him at Z. I don't think he's very fast, though. And they could put him at X, which I think is not a winning proposition for the Texans. They also drafted Jaylen Null, his teammate in college. And I think that Null can definitely be a Z and especially a slot. So I think that Higgins does have a chance to be used in the slot more than some teams that he could have been drafted to, right? So I think that his upside is probably in the low wide receiver 2 to high end wide receiver 3 range. Maybe a little bit higher if touchdowns go his way with like some of these other guys as well. But I don't think the upside is nearly that of the tier 1 and 2, tier 2 wide receivers in his future because I just think he's a little bit more limited than people want to admit. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Shack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. Moving on to tier 4, we have Jaylen Royals of the Kansas City Chiefs and Pat Bryant of the Denver Broncos. Pre-draft, I was incredibly high on Jaylen Royals. He graded out as an 85. He was, if you include Travis Hunter, the 4th highest graded wide receiver. I still really like him. I think he reasonably comps to somebody that I think he's going to be immediately replacing in the short term in Rashee Rice. They're both 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and very good after the catch, but not necessarily the best route runners, but I definitely think that Jaylen Royals is a very good route runner. With Royals, I definitely think that he's going to be used in the slot in the Rashee Rice role, as Rashee Rice has been put on injured reserve with that knee injury when Mahomes took him out. And Rashee Rice also has that looming suspension incoming, which could potentially be, who knows, 4 games, potentially maybe 10, 12, who knows? So I definitely think that in the short term, he does have a path to opportunity. He's connected to Mahomes, Andy Reid. You really couldn't ask for a much better situation in terms of if he's able to see the field in the Rashee Rice role. He's incredible after the catch. He's very good in the screen game. He can win vertically deep down the field. He has pretty good hands. The level of competition, at Utah State was definitely questionable, but, against Boise State, he had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So when he did play a ranked opponent, he absolutely crushed them. He did miss the end of this past season with an injury, but, he looked fine at the combine and ran a 4.42, which, once again, I don't really care about combine numbers, but, on the field, his 4.42 speed does translate. I think that it's a little bit cloudy to project what we could see from him, but I definitely think that if, Rashee Rice misses a good bit of time or just isn't the same player, that Jaylen Royals does potentially have a wide receiver 2 upside. He's probably not going to be a wide receiver 1 in my opinion, but I think he's talented enough to be. But, there is always the chance that when Rashee Rice comes back, along with him not receiving elite draft capital being Royals, that he is relegated to a more minimal role in the offense. So that's why I have him a little bit down here in the rankings. But once again, I really like this guy, and the upside is absolutely immense. And if he is able to seize the opportunity in Rice's absence and dominate, there's a chance he just keeps the role outright. Moving on to Pat Bryant of the Broncos, I think that this is Sean Payton's long-term Cortland Sutton replacement. Out at Illinois, I was thoroughly impressed with Pat Bryant. I think that his fit in the offense is probably as an X, potentially a big slot as well. I don't think that he's going to be a Z because he's not very fast off the line. And his route running is fine, but not incredible. Now, with Pat Bryant, he has vice grip hands. He's very physical. He will shove you out of his way, but he's a little bit slow off the line. But just like, with Mike Evans, for instance, he has those long strides. And once he gets going, he definitely gains speed. Another thing, he is fantastic after the catch. This guy is dominant after the catch. I think in the Sean Payton offense that he could immediately replace Devon Vele as a big slot. I don't think he's just outright replacing Cortland Sutton right now, but there is the opportunity for that long term. I like the fit with Bo Nix. I love the fit once again with Sean Payton. I think that this guy is very talented and was slipping under the radar. I was ecstatic when he received the third-round draft capital. And I think that, his upside is a little bit cloudy, just like with Jaylen Royals in the short term. I think that he could potentially be a wide receiver 3 right now, but I definitely think that he could be a wide receiver 2 in the future should he be the Cortland Sutton replacement and they look to move on from him, while being connected to a good quarterback and a good offensive scheme. Taking a look at tier 5, we have Jaylen Null, Ty Felton, and Trey Harris. Jaylen Null was selected in the third round by the Houston Texans. He has a 71.5 score. I think he's very good after the catch, but I think he's more limited. I don't think that he can be your true number 1, at least at the X position. I think he's primarily a slot, but can also play in the Z. He's very, very quick. He's a good route runner. He stacks vertically with ease. He has good hands. With Jaden Higgins, he was a nice 1-2 punch, with Higgins being the more big body possession type and Null being the take the top off the defense type. Now, why he's down here is because it is a little bit crowded, right? And it's going to be crowded for a substantially long time, in my opinion. He has Nico Collins being the wide receiver 1 on the Texans. And then Higgins did receive, he was the second pick in the second round of the NFL draft. So I think that, with his draft capital disparity between Nico Collins, who received the extension, so not really the draft capital, and Jaden Higgins, that he is probably the third option in terms of the wide receiver group. But I think he's really talented. I think he is going to be on the field for sure in 3 wide receiver sets. And I think he could potentially be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, depending on how they want to use Jaden Higgins. As far as the upside, I think that he's probably a wide receiver 4 in the short term without injury, but Nico Collins has missed time in every one of his first 4 NFL seasons. And so just understand that there is an opportunity for him to absolutely blow up if given the opportunity and the volume. I like that he's connected to CJ Stroud, and I think this offense should look to bounce back a little bit this season. Moving on to Ty Felton, he graded out as a 74. He is fantastic after the catch. I think he's going to be a good Z or a slot. Now, it's once again, just like with Null, it's a crowded situation in Minnesota. I like that he's connected to KOC as the head coach, an offensive-minded head coach. He's fantastic. JJ McCarthy, we're not sure what to expect from him. Everybody else has been able to succeed in this Vikings offense, at least in short spurts or potentially over the course of an entire year with the Vikings. So I hope it's wheels up for McCarthy, but we don't really know. Now, he's definitely not the wide receiver 1. Just like with Null and Nico Collins, Ty Felton has to deal with Jay Jettas. Jay Jettas is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver. I definitely understand if you think Chase is, though, or potentially CeeDee Lamb and the like. He's probably going to be the 3rd option at best in terms of the wide receiver pecking order, but he's probably the 4th option behind TJ Hawkinson as well at tight end, with Jordan Addison as well. So I think that Ty Felton's upside and floor is a little bit suppressed right now, but I think that he long-term could see a lot of upside if there's an injury to anyone else in the receiver core. And I think that he's a very talented wide receiver who is very, very good after the catch. He has incredible release packages. His speed release is one of the best in the class. Now, he moves east to west sometimes, which does allow defenders to kind of get back in and reduces his separation, but he's very effective on slant routes and digs, and he doesn't really stack as well deep down the field because while he's very quick, his long speed just doesn't sustain. So I definitely think that over the first 2 levels of the field, he's very dangerous, but I don't think he's really a consistent vertical threat. And so once again, due to target competition, I think that he's going to be a little bit suppressed in terms of his production this year. Then we have Trey Harris of the Chargers. Now, Trey Harris, if you just look at the advanced stats, this guy is ridiculous, right? Now, I think that the Ole Miss offense can be a little bit deceiving and can lead to some better production than the talent of some of these players. Now, another thing with Trey Harris is he is going to be a boundary receiver completely. Boundary receivers typically do not produce as well for us in fantasy. They're more volatile because their targets are deeper down the field, which are just harder to complete. And we just want the floor, right? We want the easy targets. So I think that Ladd McConkey is definitely going to be their Z and 2 wide receiver sets, and I think he's going to be their slot and 3 wide receiver sets. And so I think that Trey Harris is going to be a bit volatile, where you're going to have some of those big DK Metcalf-like games if things go his way, where he goes 6 for 102 and 2, right? But I definitely think he's going to have those 3 for 42 games because just the volume isn't going to be there, and the targets are a little bit more difficult to complete. Now, they also, drafted Amari and Hampton. They have Najee Harris. It's Jim Harbaugh under Greg Roman, or it's Greg Roman under Jim Harbaugh. They're going to look to run the ball as much as possible. They're set up to do so. And so while he does have very good quarterback play, I think he's going to be extremely volatile. And, just due to the, first of all, lack of projected passing volume in the offense, and then with him being behind Ladd McConkey in a very, once again, run-heavy offense, I think, and given his nature of being a boundary wide receiver, I think that his production is going to be so volatile that it's actually going to hurt you, because I really don't think you're going to be able to know when you want to start him versus sit him. So I'm out just because of the specific position I think he's going to play in the offense. But at some point, I think he's going to be a great value, and he is going to have those boom games for you from time to time. And so to wrap things up, my tiers consist of Travis Hunter and Ted McMillan in tier 1 in the S tier. I think that Travis Hunter and Tet have the ability to be game-breaking wide receiver ones for us in fantasy. With Travis Hunter, he comps to Garrett Wilson, a much better athlete than technically sound route runner at this time. But boy, if he figures out the route running, this guy is going to be ridiculous. Remember that while yes, he has to deal with Brian Thomas, remember that Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were both able to peacefully coexist. And while Trevor Lawrence hasn't been the elite quarterback that we had hoped he would be, I think he's fine, and I think he's finally going to get good coaching and have the adequate playmakers around him to succeed. With Ted McMillan, it's dependent, in terms of your upside view of him, as to whether you really think that Bryce Young is going to be able to continue what we saw in the second half of this past season. I like that he has Canales. He's the clear wide receiver 1 in the receiver room, and he should get a good bit of volume. The floor is very, very high. In my opinion, the best in the class with Ted McMillan. He just doesn't have the deep speed to stack vertically, consistently at least. But I definitely think that both of these guys could be game-breaking wide receiver ones for us in fantasy. Then you have your tier 2, which consists of Emeka Ibuka, Luther Burden, and Matthew Golden. These are players that I think have a good bit of upside, but are either in murky situations or just are a little bit more risky, in my opinion, than the first two. With Emeka Ibuka, he's going to be behind both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans in the short term, but he's connected to Baker Mayfield. There should be a good bit of passing volume and plenty of touchdowns. So I think that while his short-term upside is a little bit more limited, I think long-term he could be a solid wide receiver 2 for us in fantasy consistently. Then you have Luther Burden, fantastic after the catch. Once again, just like with Ibuka, very, very crowded situation with Colson Loveland, Cole Kmet, Rama Dunze, and DJ Moore. I think he probably plays the slot and 3 wide receiver sets that potentially look to trade DJ Moore, and then we could see real growth from Luther Burden. And then we have Matthew Golden, who I'm a little bit lower on. Remember that he really didn't break out until the last 4 games or so of his true junior season. And while I think he's very talented, I really don't like the fit in Green Bay. I think Jordan Love is a very inaccurate quarterback who's just not that talented. I think we saw, in terms of his total playtime, he's been an elite quarterback a quarter of the time and very poor in 3/4 of the time. So he also has a decent amount of target competition. I don't think he's just this dominant game-breaking wide receiver 1 that some people think he is, but I definitely think he does have a good bit of upside and should be the clear number 1 in their own offense. Once again, it makes me sound like a hater. I'm just trying to give people realistic expectations of what's probably going to happen with him. Then in tier 3, we have Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, and Jaden Higgins. With Kyle Williams, I really like this guy. He comps a little bit more to a poor man's Garrett Wilson than necessarily Travis Hunter, who I think is just a better athlete, but very comparable to Garrett Wilson rather. Let me rephrase that coming out. With Kyle Williams, he does have the opportunity to be the number one on his own team, but he did receive third-round draft capital. In the short term, he has to contend with Stephon Diggs. We'll see what he looks like post-ACL, but he's connected to Drake May, and I really like Kyle Williams, and I think you should do everything in your power to snag him in rookie drafts. With Jack Besh, he's almost certainly the number 2 under Brock Bowers, but he does also have to contend with Jacoby Myers and Ashton Genty in a Pete Carroll offense that projects to be pretty run-heavy. So I definitely think that there's a low floor with a decent ceiling with him. Then we have Jaden Higgins. I really like this landing spot. He's connected to CJ Stroud. He doesn't have to be the number 1 X wide receiver. That can be Nico Collins. Remember that he's very poor against press coverage and does fail to stack vertically despite running a 4.47, but he has vice grip hands and short area quickness that we like, especially for somebody his size. I think he is the perfect candidate to be a big slot, and I think that's how they're going to use him. Potentially as a Z as well, but I think his best fit is as a big slot. Then in tier 4, we have Jaylen Royals and Pat Bryant. With Jaylen Royals, I was really high on him coming out. I think he comps actually reasonably well once again to the player I think he's replacing in the short term in Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is on IR. I think he's going to see the Rashee Rice role immediately. If he thrives, maybe he overtakes Rashee Rice. Who knows how likely that is, right? But there is a realistic chance there, and I think that's specifically why they drafted him. He's connected to Mahomes and Andy Reid. I love that from long term. And if he is able to somehow overtake Rashee Rice long term with that suspension and injury to Rice, there's a ton of upside for this guy. And I think he could, if everything goes his way, be a wide receiver 1 for us in fantasy. Although I think it's reasonably unlikely for sure. Then with Pat Bryant, I think he's the long-term Courtland Sutton replacement. I think he definitely could see the field immediately as a big slot, replacing Devon Vele. He's very good after the catch, very physical, very good vice grip-like hands. And I think that he is going to see the field in 3 wide receiver sets. He was selected in the 3rd round. And I think as soon as this next year, he could really see some good upside as a wide receiver 2, kind of like a Courtland Sutton in terms of production. Then in the final tier, we have Jalen Null, Ty Felton, and Trey Harris. With Jalen Null, he was selected in the 3rd round to the Texans. I like that he's connected to Stroud. I think he's probably going to be a Z because he's very fast off the line. He can threaten vertically, but he can also play some slot. I think, though, that due to the draft capital disparity, he's probably, going to be the 3rd option at best in this offense. So I think that the floor is a little bit low, but the ceiling any given game is big because he can take anything to the house. Then you have Ty Felton, who's fantastic after the catch, very quick off the line, some of the best speed releases in the class. He does struggle a little bit to get north and likes to be a little bit too wiggly, which allows defenders to catch up with him. But he's very good in the slants, and I think he's going to be a very good asset for them in the first 2 levels of the field. Once again, I think he's a very low floor, low ceiling player in the immediate future, but with a good bit of upside because I really like him after the catch. Then you have Trey Harris, who's really your strictly boundary wide receiver. I think he's going to be the vertical X in this offense. Another thing I didn't mention, he has to contend with Mike Williams in the short term. Now, Williams is very injury prone, but he is probably going to start out as their vertical X. With the X position, you get balls deep down the field. The accuracy is just not going to be as good. The volume isn't quite as good necessarily either. I think Ladd McConkey is easily their number 1 option, and a Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh-led run-heavy offense that just selected Amari Hampton in the 1st round. So I definitely think that he's a good fit for the offense, but I think he's going to be a better real-life player than a fantasy player. I think the production is going to be very inconsistent with him. I think you're going to have a good bit of those 3 for 40 in zeroed games, but then, you're also going to get those 6 for 102 games with him. And so if you like what you've seen and heard, feel free to like and subscribe. Please check out my Patreon. I would really appreciate any support. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, and have a good day.